Hey guys, welcome back to A Good Life Farm. So today I'm bringing you into the kitchen to make a little bit of an unusual jelly recipe. This is a recipe that utilizes something that you can forage in your yard and something that a lot of people would never think of to use, and that is clover. Now, it may surprise you to hear that you can actually make jelly out of all sorts of different kinds of flowers. And there's a recipe that I put on my website a couple years ago for honeysuckle jelly. I think the first flower jelly I ever made was fireweed jelly when we lived up in Alaska. And so today I'm going to show you how to take beautiful clover blossoms and turn those into a jelly as well. Now, when you're foraging for the blossoms, you want to look for ones that are in good condition. You don't want dried up, crusty brown ones. You will see a little bit of brown on most of the blossoms, and that's perfectly fine. You just don't want the really dead ones. You're going to need 2 cups of fresh clover blossoms, and you can use white clover to make this. You can use red clover or crimson clover. Any of your typical clover varieties would work just fine to make this. And you're going to want to pick the blossoms, but remove any pieces of stem. The stems could give a bitter flavor to your jelly, and you don't want that. Put them in a heat-safe container, and then you're going to boil some water. You're going to need 2.5 cups of boiling water, and you're going to pour that boiling water over the top of your clover blossoms. Put a lid on the container. I use a mason jar because I've got lots of those and they're very handy. And once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and just let your clover blossoms sit overnight and create a lovely infusion from the blossoms. So the next day you'll prepare all of your items. I always wash my jars and my canning utensils. Even though they're clean when I put them away, I always like to wash them fresh when I'm about to use them. And as I go through and I wash the jars, I inspect all of the rims, make sure there's no chips or cracks or any kind of flaw, because if there is, that could interfere with the jars sealing when you can them. I set up a little dish with vinegar in it so that I can wipe the rims of the jars as I'm closing them up. And I measured out the rest of my ingredients, which is 1/4 cup of lemon juice, 4 cups of organic sugar, and then 1 pouch of powdered original pectin. Then I take a jelly bag and I strain out all of the liquid from the clovers, and you're going to need 2.25 cup of the liquid. If for some reason you don't have quite enough, you want to go ahead and add up just a little bit of water to make up the difference, but I usually have more than enough. If you are using the white Dutch clover blossoms to make this jelly, you're going to have kind of a yellow lemonade looking tea or infusion. If you use red clover or crimson clover, it's going to give you kind of a pink sort of color to that. And you can actually use a combination of the different kinds of clovers if you want to do that too. So then in a nice big pot, I combined the clover infusion or juice along with the lemon juice and the powdered pectin. And then we stir this all together over a high heat and let it come to a rolling boil. This is a high acid recipe, so you'll want to process the jars in either a hot water bath canner or a steam canner, whichever one you prefer to use. The processing time will be the same for both. When I'm doing small batches like this, I love to use my steam canner. And so I went ahead and I filled it with water up to the appropriate level with a splash of white vinegar, because that helps reduce any hard water minerals building up on the jars or anything else. Then I set the jars in the canner and I went ahead and set them on the stove and let them start heating up while I work on the jelly. Once it's come to a nice rolling boil for a minute, I add in all of the sugar And then I continue to stir and cook this until it comes back to a rolling boil. And you want it to boil again for a full minute. And then you'll remove it from the heat. And then you'll jar it up into your mason jars. And you can use either 8-ounce or 4-ounce jars with this recipe. You'll fill the jars to 1/4 inch of headspace, which is the distance from the top of the jar down to the top of the food. And honestly, when I have liquid recipes like this, where it's just a complete liquid, I don't really use a bubble wand. I only use that if I've got something with some substance to it. But, you know, you can use a bubble wand if you so choose to do so. Then I wipe the rims of the jars with a damp rag dipped in vinegar, put a lid and a ring on, and then I process the jars for 10 minutes. Now, as always, all canning recipes provide processing times for elevations that are under 1,000 feet. If you happen to live at a higher elevation, you do want to adjust all your canning recipes for the elevation of where you live. Be sure to check out the article on my website that explains how to adapt all of your recipes for your elevation. I will put a link to that down below. So once your jars are done processing, you're going to transfer them over to a lined surface in a draft-free location and let them sit overnight and let them fully cool and set up. And the next day, you'll remove the rings and test your seals. Make sure all your jars are sealed. If you have any that didn't seal, you'll want to use those right away and stick them in your refrigerator. Then label your jars and put them away in your pantry. If you would like to make this recipe, I have a printable version of the full recipe over on my website, and I will put a link to that down below. Now, if you ever have an issue where your jelly doesn't set up, I have a tutorial on my website that shows you how you might be able to save that jelly after all, and I'll put a link to that as well. So thanks for joining me here again in the Homestead Kitchen. My name is Constance at A Good Life Farm, and I'll talk to y'all next time.